Tyrese Haliburton has been going insane this year, in the best way possible. And he's a top point guard in the league. The numbers he's been putting up have been crazy. It's so ridiculous. He's one of the best offensive point guards in the league, and he needs some more recognition for sure. And he's putting up such crazy numbers, it's hard not to compare him to some of the best point guards we've ever seen. But it's hard to come up with a proper comparison. But when you look at his skill set, he's eerily similar to Chris Paul in some aspects. Call me crazy, but Halliburton is the closest thing to Chris Paul. And today I'm going to tell y'all why. Let's talk about it. This season, Tyrese has been absolutely incredible. He's dragged a Pacers team that nobody had anywhere near the playoffs, except for me, and he's put them into a playoff position, and they're doing very well for themselves. 8th seed and a 17-16 record is very solid, especially for a team that nobody had anywhere near the playoffs. Although they do have some other offensive weapons like Buddy Hield, Benedict Mathurin, Miles Turner, Halliburton is the one who's powering all of this, and he's led them to an above average offense, 14th ranked in the NBA right now. And his individual stats have been out of this world. 21 points, 48% from the field, 40% from 3, and he's leading the league in assists at 10.5 a game. Those are video game-like numbers, and his true shooting on top of that at like 62% is damn near unheard of for a guy who's having the ball in his hands with this amount of volume and taking on this amount of responsibility on the offensive end. He's just unbelievable. When you look at his draft day comparisons, and people were comparing him to Lonzo and Dante Exum, I mean, those are solid players, more so Lonzo, but that's a bit disrespectful compared to what he's become right now. He is way out of their echelon, it's not even close. In fact, his echelon is closer to a prime Chris Paul at this moment. When you look at his stats, he puts up prime Chris Paul numbers, and in year 3 especially, him and Chris Paul, their stats are pretty identical, and some of the storylines are just very similar as well. In year 3, Chris Paul averaged 21 points, 11 assists, and 3 steals, which, if you recall, is very similar to Tyrese's right now in year 3. And they were both around the same age when they came out of college, both put up very similar stats in college. So it's safe to say that they're extremely alike in the way that they play the game and their numbers and storylines as well. In terms of their skill sets, of course, they're both elite playmakers. Chris Paul averaging like 11 assists, 11.5 assists in his 3rd season. And who knows, the rate that Tyrese is at right now, I would not be surprised if he got there by the end of the season. They're both very crafty finishers when it comes to getting to the bucket and finishing. I would say that Chris Paul is a better finisher around the rim than Tyrese, but they're pretty similar in some of those aspects. Chris Paul is a much better defender than Tyrese. He's actually one of the better point guard defenders of all time, and Tyrese, he just doesn't really touch that level. But Tyrese is definitely not a scrub either. Averaging like 1.7 steals for his career is pretty solid for a point guard with that amount of offensive load, where he's getting extremely tired on one end and still being able to provide a good amount of value on the defensive end. When it comes to shooting, Tyrese is way better. The range that Tyrese has is up there with some of the better shooters in the league for sure. And the volume that he's shooting them at and the percentage that he's managing to keep up at this moment is unbelievable. And Chris Paul has never been able to do that in his career. Chris Paul is a better mid-range shooter. That's where he's operated for majority of his career, and that's where he's made most of his money scoring on the offensive end. But in terms of three-point shooting, Tyrese clears him by a large amount. Overall, they're very similar in a lot of aspects. CP might be a little bit better in terms of his defense, but Tyrese is a better three-point shooter at this point in his career. And I dare to say if CP came into the league right now, when Halliburton got drafted, they'd be damn near the same player. Just the way that the game's evolved, I think there'd be less of an emphasis on Chris Paul's defense and probably more emphasis on his three-point shooting. And that would leave him to be almost exactly the same as Halliburton. Ever since I saw Tyrese get drafted on draft night with him and his girl, I had to start rooting for the guy. And ever since then, I fell in love with his game, and he's been one of my favorite young players in the league. And I think it's about time he gets the respect that he deserves for being one of the best young players in the league and one of the best young point guards in the league as well. I think he could be considered in the top 7 point guards in the league overall. I think he's that good. And if he was in a different market like LA or even maybe Chicago, I think people would be considering him in that conversation, if not higher. But because he's in Indiana, nobody really cares what he's doing. And it holds a little bit less weight compared to some of the better players in the league. Tyrese has absolutely got a super bright future ahead, but he's going to need to lead the Pacers to some significant playoff success if he wants to get anywhere near Chris Paul. But if he's really this good and he really is one of the best young point guards in the league, hopefully he can do what Chris Paul couldn't do and possibly lead his team to an NBA Finals. That would make me one of the happiest guys on planet Earth. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And as always, stay rested. See you in the next one.